So this is my beginner's guide 4-part video series. Thanks to Wizards of the Coast for sponsoring this one. And the first one I'm going to be talking about card types in Magic. So we're gonna start with the basic card types. That is lands. Lands in Magic are the source of mana. You can play one land each turn. There are different types of lands. There are basic lands for each color, and then there are also special lands that usually have some benefits and some downsides to them. For example, like if you have a land that can make two different types of mana, it's oftentimes it enters tapped, or you need to pay life to play it. Or if it gains you life, it might also enter tapped. There's a variety of different types of special lands, but lands are the basic source of mana. You can play one land each turn, unless you are doing so-called ramping, which usually allows you to play additional lands. Those cards are usually in the green color. The next cards that we're talking about are creatures. Creatures are the basic units in Magic. In different colors, there's different types of units. Creatures also have their creature type. For example, this one right here would be a human cleric. So if there's any cards that maybe are related to do something with the type human or the type cleric, this card would be gaining the upsides or the downsides of that. Creatures, like the other cards in Magic 2 besides lands, the mana cost is on the top right, and the stats are on the bottom right. So this one would have 1 power and 1 life. Bigger creatures, obviously, and more expensive creatures have stronger stat lines. And when you play a creature in Magic, it usually, unless it has the keyword haste, creatures cannot use their activated abilities or attack on the same turn as you play them. Abilities such as these two right here, these are not activated abilities. These ones you can play. It does not require tapping, so you could sacrifice this creature, for example, pay 1 mana and sacrifice on the turn you play it. But if you, for example, Soul Mender with the tap and gain 1 life would not be usable on the first turn. On either your turn you play this, or your opponent's turn on the turn after you played it. We also have in Magic, we have instants and sorceries. Those are, people in spoken language, instants and sorceries are kind of called spells, but technically everything except for lands are spells in Magic. Instant spells are spell cards that you can use any time in the game if you have the mana to cast them, unless something specifically prevents you from using those, such as Teferi, Time Raveler. Instant cards are more flexible than sorceries, which I will talk about in just a bit, because you can play them on your opponent's turn. Usually they are a little bit weaker because of that, because of the effect. Being able to use them at any time certainly is a benefit. Creatures can usually only be played on your own turn, except if creature has flash. If creature card has flash ability, you can basically play the creature in the same manner as you could play an instant spell. So sorceries are kind of similar, I suppose, except that the instances are except that the sorceries you can only play on your own turn. You can play it only on your own turn during one of the 2 main phases. I will be talking about the phases in a little bit later on, but you can play them on your own main phase, and sorceries tend to be more powerful for the cost for that reason, due to the limitation. So I wanted to talk about counter spells. So counter spells are not a card type on their own, or not a card type by themselves, but it's like in spoken language, and it seems like one of those most relevant instant spells that you can think of. So when you're playing against blue decks in particular, it is something that you should maybe keep in mind sometimes, or not be too surprised by it. So your spells, which once again, like creatures are spells, and like all the card types except for lands are spells in Magic, so they can get countered, which stops the effect or the unit or the creature or the spell from happening, or creature from entering their battlefield. So I just want to give like a special shout out to counter spells, but counter spells are not a a card type by themselves. They are instants. Okay, next up we have let's look at the artifacts. So artifacts are colorless cards, which makes them a little bit special. Artifacts also, there's a lot of specific things that interact with artifacts. There can be cards that specify that destroy a target artifact, and you can play artifacts in any color deck. So when you look at the top right, the mana cost is always in gray. So no matter if you're playing a green deck or you're playing a blue deck or black deck, whatever deck you are playing out of those are the 5 basic colors. You can always play artifacts. And there are also decks that are specifically like built around artifacts. Artifacts can also they can be like standalone things where it's not a creature, or artifacts can be creatures if it says artifact creature. If they are creatures, they have stat lines, of course. The power and the life on the bottom right once again. There's a variety of different artifacts. Some of these artifacts do have like colors, like the Great Henge or Wishclaw Talisman. These are kind of like a special ones. It's pretty rare that these are, but in their more recent sets there has been a few ones of these. But usually they are colorless. Next we can look at the Enchantments. Enchantments is another card type. It's not a creature and it stays on the battlefield after you play it. When you play a sorcery, the effect happens, and then the spell itself goes to the graveyard. But with enchantments, they might do something when they enter, or they might have an ongoing effect. But either way, it will stay on the battlefield unless specifically states that like sacrifice this or something after doing something. Again, there's a variety of different types of effects that enchantment can do. Another like subtype of the enchantments, the enchantment aura, which are enchantments that you play on a creature that you have. Then it's attached when it becomes attached to the creature once you play it, and usually makes it more powerful. Or there are also enchantments the enchantment auras that you put on your opponent's creatures to make them weaker in one way or another, or even to like destroy them in some instances with some black enchantments. Yeah, every color has their own type of enchantments. All of the colors have a little bit like different flavors to them. White tends to have like some of the more powerful ones. Another enchantment type that I wanted to talk about is the saga enchantments. These ones are, I suppose, fairly new in the 26-year history of Magic. The saga enchantments have different stages. So let's look at Birth of Melodies here, for example. The first phase of this says, search your library for a basic planes card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So the first stage happens as you play this card. The second 2 phases will happen on the consecutive turns. So if in one turn after playing the Birth of Melodies it's still there, it will on your next turn it will generate or do whatever the second stage of it says, which in this instance would be to create a 0/4 colorless token. If once again, and then next turn, if the Birth of Melodies is still there, you will also gain 3 life. After the third effect happens, Birth of Melodies will be sacrificed automatically. So sagas are sacrificed after the third stage. Some sagas may also have 4 stages to them. So in those instances, obviously it stays for 4 turns. But yeah, so these are another special type of enchantment. I really like these cards personally. There's a lot of really interesting ones. Elspeth Conquers Death, maybe one of my favorites. Does pretty powerful things. But yeah, okay, enough about that. Planeswalker cards have their own unique set of abilities. You can activate Planeswalker's abilities only once per turn. On your own turn, except that there's a new card that you can activate on your opponent's turn too, because of special effect that it says. But generally speaking, you can use one ability on each of your own turns. So, for example, if I played Pasriket, on the turn that I play him and on every turn after that, as long as he's on the battlefield, as long as he has enough loyalty, I can use abilities accordingly. So on the bottom right of this card, you see the starting loyalty. It starts with 3 loyalty, and if you have at least 2, you are able to use the -2 ability. If you do not have enough loyalty, you will not be able to use those abilities. Basriket loses loyalty for each damage point that he takes. So if 2 damage is dealt to Basriket, he would go from 3 loyalty down to 1 loyalty. Oftentimes these cards have a 1+ ability, which is the weakest of the abilities, and then there's a mild minus ability, which is a little bit more powerful, that takes away loyalty, and then there's oftentimes also an ultimate ability, so-called ultimate ability, which is something very powerful. Another important thing to point out was that on your turns you cannot use multiple abilities. So if I choose to use the +1 ability, I will not be able to use the -2 ability on the same turn. Another thing to add is about Planeswalker is that once your opponent is attacking with creatures, they can choose whether they want to attack at the Planeswalker or at the player. And if you are worried about the Planeswalker making you lose, you can choose to attack at it. Planeswalkers, once again, there's a lot of different types of Planeswalkers in different colors, the different flavors, doing different things. Red ones tend to be more aggressive, and the expensive ones obviously are more powerful. Once we get to the 5 and 6 mana Planeswalkers, oftentimes they're able to just win games by themselves, if not dealt with in timely manner. I think that's everything for the card types. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about keywords. There's a lot of keywords in Magic, so we'll get through some of the basic ones.